Being betrayed by my English teacher felt nothing like the cheap, clumsy stings of high school gossip. It was a clean, precise cut designed to sever my voice from my future. This time, however, I wouldn't be the one left speechless. From the podium, looking out over the sea of 800 hopeful graduates and their families, my eyes found her in the faculty section. Mrs. Henderson. Her face, a mask of polite indifference just moments before, was already starting to flush a blotchy, anxious red. She thought I was here to offer inspiration. She had no idea I was here to collect a debt. I had been a broken girl, a charity case with a thick accent she'd openly despised. Now, I was Dr. Elena Chen, a celebrated linguist, a scholar whose work was printed in journals that sat on shelves in the very libraries she policed. My rebirth wasn't a quiet flicker of self-improvement. It was a five-alarm fire, and she was standing at the epicenter. The auditorium air hung thick and still as I leaned into the microphone, my opening remarks flowing not in the king's English she worshipped, but in flawless, melodic Mandarin. A gasp rippled through the front rows. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, flashed through my mind. Her voice, dripping with condescension in front of 30 of my peers. "Your accent makes Shakespeare sound like broken glass, Elena. Perhaps you should stick to your native tongue in my classroom." I honored her request, my voice carrying across the silent hall as I seamlessly transitioned from Mandarin to the fluid, passionate cadence of Spanish, the language of my mother. Finally, I switched to the crisp, unaccented English I had perfected at Oxford. I watched her hands, the ones that had once circled my grammatical errors in blood-red ink, tremble in her lap. The humiliation was a palpable thing, a spotlight shining directly on her crumbling composure. This wasn't just a speech, it was a reckoning, and the first charge on the indictment had just been read. The catalyst for this moment had arrived 3 weeks earlier, a ghost from a past I had meticulously buried. It was a gold-embossed invitation, thick as cardstock, and carrying the official seal of Lincoln High School. The irony was so bitter, it made my tongue ache. The place where I learned shame had a sound, where my guidance counselor, at Mrs. Henderson's urging, suggested I aim for a career in food service or housekeeping, now wanted me to be their symbol of success. My assistant, Marcus, a brilliant polymath who could ghostwrite a political thesis or organize a 3-continent book tour with equal ease, found me staring at the invitation in my Manhattan penthouse office, tears streaming down my face even as a slow, sharp smile spread across my lips. He cleared his throat, confused by the bizarre display of joyful misery. "Dr. Chen, is that bad news?" he asked, gesturing toward the elegant stationery. I shook my head, wiping a tear away with the back of my hand. "No, Marcus," I said, my voice dangerously even. "It's an opportunity. There's someone I need to see again. Someone who taught me the most valuable lesson of my life." That night, sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Surrounded by the comforting silence of my academic sanctuary, with floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the glittering tapestry of the city below, I dove into the digital ghost stream of my past. The walls were lined not with novels, but with linguistics journals bearing my name as a contributor, editor, or subject. I typed Lincoln High School faculty into the search bar, a familiar knot of dread and anger tightening in my stomach. And there she was, Margaret Henderson, still the head of the senior English department, her staff photo 15 years older, but her smile just as thin, just as judgmental. A few clicks led me to recent student reviews, and the rage I thought I'd conquered came roaring back to life. "She makes you feel stupid for having an accent." Another read, "I stopped participating after she corrected my pronunciation of schedule in front of everyone and the whole class laughed." She hadn't changed. She was still a dream killer, still wielding her red pen like a scalpel, surgically removing the confidence of any student who sounded different. But I was different now, too. I had tools she never expected me to acquire. The next morning, I called Principal Morris. His voice was a wave of palpable relief when I accepted the speaking engagement. "Dr. Chen, this is magnificent news. Having a Lincoln alumna of your caliber, a true titan in your field, will be such an honor for the students." I let the praise wash over me, a soothing balm on a very old wound. I didn't mention that his star teacher once told me I'd never amount to anything because, as she so primly put it, Communication is everything in America, Elena, and you simply cannot communicate effectively. I just smiled into the receiver, the plan crystallizing in my mind, each piece clicking into place with cold, satisfying precision. I wouldn't just speak at their graduation. I was going to give Mrs. Henderson a private lecture on the power of a voice she tried and failed to silence. The black town car purred to a stop before the crumbling brick facade of Lincoln High, a stark contrast to the yellow school bus that used to deliver me to this personal purgatory. 15 years had passed, but the air inside still smelled the same, a cloying mix of floor wax, adolescent anxiety, and stale cafeteria pizza. This time, however, the familiar linoleum floors echoed with the sharp, confident click of my expensive heels, not the scuff of worn-out sneakers. I wore a tailored Armani suit, a suit that cost more than the car I'd dreamed of owning back then. Students stared as I walked past, their eyes tracing the lines of a woman who clearly didn't belong, never guessing I was the same girl who once ate her lunch huddled in a forgotten corner of the library to avoid the whispers and stares. I found her classroom easily. The nameplate, Mrs. Henderson, was the same. Through the small window in the door, I saw her, a predator in her natural habitat. She was leaning over a boy's desk, her posture radiating disapproval. I couldn't hear her words, but I didn't need to. The Korean student's slumped shoulders, his face burning with shame as she pointed at his essay, told the entire story. My chest tightened, a familiar ache blooming beneath my ribs. She hadn't changed one bit, but I had everything I needed to ensure she would never forget me. I timed my appearance for the passing period, positioning myself as if examining a faded school spirit poster just down the hall. As the bell shrieked, she emerged, a sea of students parting around her. I stepped forward, putting on my most pleasant, professional smile. "Mrs. Henderson?" I began, my voice calm and even. "I'm Dr. Elena Chen, your commencement speaker. I believe I was in your class 15 years ago?" Her eyes, pale and searching, scanned my face with a complete lack of recognition. The blankness was a fresh insult, a confirmation that I had been so utterly insignificant to her that my memory had been wiped clean. "Oh, of course, Dr. Chen," she said, her tone the vaguely polite one she reserved for parents or school board members. "I'm sure you were wonderful. I've had so many students over the years." The casual dismissal, the erasure of the pain she'd inflicted, stung more than I expected. I let my smile widen just a fraction. "I understand completely," I said, my voice dropping almost to a whisper. "But I'm certain you'll remember me by graduation day." My meeting with Principal Morris was a masterclass in manipulation. I sat in the same worn guest chair where my mother had once listened to Mrs. Henderson explain why a university education was an unrealistic goal for me. This time, however, I was the one in control. "To celebrate the incredible diversity of our student body," I explained, leaning forward with manufactured passion, "I'd like to incorporate multiple languages into my speech, to send a message that every heritage, every voice has value here." Morris practically vibrated with enthusiasm. "Dr. Chen, that's brilliant. That is exactly the inclusive message we want to send." He was putty in my hands. As we finalized the logistics, I made one small final request. "And for the faculty seating, would it be possible to have them right up front? I feel it's so important for the students to see their educators sharing in the moment." He agreed instantly. Mrs. Henderson would have a perfect, unobstructed view of her own downfall. That night, I made calls to a few old classmates, people who'd witnessed my daily humiliations and were now teachers themselves in other districts. The intelligence I gathered confirmed my suspicions about her reputation. The trap was beginning to take shape. The first public hint of my strategy came 2 days later, during a faculty meeting. I wasn't there, but Morris called me immediately after, practically giddy with excitement. He had announced my speech theme, a celebration of linguistic diversity and the power of multilingual communication. He described the scene to me, how most of the younger faculty had applauded the idea. "There was a little pushback, of course," he added, his voice dropping conspiratorially, "from some of the more traditionalist staff." I knew exactly who he meant. I could picture her perfectly, the slight frown, the hand raised with a sense of weary obligation. "Principal Morris," he recounted her saying, her voice tight with concern, "are we sure that's appropriate for an American graduation ceremony?" Her resistance was the final piece I needed. She wasn't just going to be humiliated. She was going to be exposed by her own prejudice. Her comments sent me down a new rabbit hole of research. It wasn't just about my pain anymore, it was about the systemic damage she had inflicted for decades. I found internal school board complaints from other parents about her dismissive attitude towards students who refused to adapt to American standards. I unearthed a trove of her public Facebook posts filled with thinly veiled rants about preserving traditional American values in education and laments about the decline of proper English. The pattern was undeniable. I wasn't her only victim, I was just one in a long line of students whose voices she had deemed unworthy. My white-hot anger began to cool, transforming into a diamond-hard, cold purpose. This was no longer about simple revenge on the woman who broke a teenage girl's spirit. This was about dismantling the legacy of a bully who weaponized language to enforce her narrow, ugly view of the world. For the dress rehearsal, I arrived to an almost empty auditorium that echoed with the ghosts of past assemblies. Of course, Mrs. Henderson had volunteered to sit in, ostensibly to provide feedback on acoustics and clarity. She settled into a front row seat, clutching a notepad, a self-appointed guardian of ceremonial standards. I began my speech with a few boilerplate paragraphs in perfect polished English, a delivery so crisp and articulate it could have been broadcast on the BBC. From the corner of my eye, I saw her nodding, a smug little smile playing on her lips. This was the Elena she could understand, the one who had finally assimilated. Then, without breaking rhythm, I paused and added, Zheng Ru Wo Men, Qing Ju Wo Men, Gong Tong De Cheng Ju, just as we celebrate our shared accomplishments, letting the Mandarin syllables hang in the cavernous space. Her head snapped up. The smile vanished, replaced by a hard, flinty glare. The acoustics, it seemed, were perfectly clear. She cornered me as I stepped down from the stage. Dr. Chen, she began, her voice tight with forced pleasantry. A word? I do hope you plan to keep the bulk of the speech in English. We have to remember that our families expect a traditional ceremony. She was testing me, trying to reassert the authority she once held over me. I gave her a serene smile, glancing at the Cartier watch on my wrist, a subtle reminder that my time was far more valuable than hers. Of course, Mrs. Henderson, I replied, my tone deliberately ambiguous. I always aim to exceed expectations. The double meaning flew right over her head, but the discomfort lingered in her eyes. As she walked away, a stooped figure in a custodian's uniform approached me cautiously. It was Mr. Rodriguez, a man who'd worked at the school for 30 years. Dr. Chen, he said in a low voice, his own accent a beautiful tapestry of Spanish and English. That woman. She told my daughter her accent was unprofessional. In a parent-teacher conference last month. My daughter wants to be a lawyer. He shook his head slowly. Thank you for what you're doing. His story was the final confirmation I needed. This wasn't just my battle. The next day, I had coffee with 3 current faculty members who had reached out after my visit. They were younger, hired long after I'd graduated, and they were desperate for a change. Over lattes at an off-campus cafe, the horror stories flowed. They told me about Mrs. Henderson's unofficial English-only policy in her classroom, her snide comments in faculty meetings about foreign students, and her active resistance to funding ESL support programs. One of them, a brilliant history teacher named Miss Patel, stared into her cup. She told me I should work on my diction during my final job interview, she said, her voice trembling with remembered humiliation. I have a master's from the University of Chicago. I've been here for 5 years, and she still corrects my pronunciation in department meetings. The scope of the damage was breathtaking. This wasn't isolated cruelty. It was a systematic campaign of linguistic oppression waged by one bitter, insecure woman. That evening, my mission took on an academic fervor. My countermove needed to be as precise and irrefutable as a linguistic proof. I escalated my research, digging into Mrs. Henderson's professional credentials. The irony was richer than I could have imagined. The woman who taught world literature was proudly, defiantly monolingual. The true prize, however, was her college thesis, which I unearthed from a digital university archive. Maintaining the sanctity of standard American English in increasingly diverse classrooms. It wasn't just a paper, it was a blueprint for bigotry. a 30-year-old declaration of her intent to discriminate. I immediately forwarded the document to Dr. Sarah Kim, a renowned linguistics professor at Columbia and a trusted colleague with a significant media presence, asking if she'd be interested in attending a high school graduation as my personal guest. Then, I placed a call to a contact at the local news affiliate, pitching them an exclusive on my innovative multilingual commencement address and the powerful message it would send. The trap was now baited and set. She walked right into it. 2 days before graduation, after another brief rehearsal, she approached me again, this time with two of her department cronies flanking her. The other teachers I'd met with happened to be lingering nearby, organizing programs on a table. Mrs. Henderson's face was a mask of concern. Dr. Chen, I must formally express my concern, and that of my colleagues, that you are planning on confusing our graduates with a series of foreign languages. Her voice was loud enough for the others to hear. I met her gaze, my expression one of calm, academic curiosity. "Thank you for sharing, Mrs. Henderson," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the quiet auditorium. "Just so I understand your pedagogical position, are you suggesting that linguistic diversity diminishes rather than enriches American discourse?" The question, delivered in perfect academic English, hung in the air. Her face went slack. She opened her mouth, then closed it, a fish gasping for air. Her cronies looked at their shoes. The other teachers watched, their expressions unreadable but for the slight, triumphant smiles they hid behind their hands. She had no answer. She was a literature teacher rendered speechless. I gathered my belongings to leave. "Don't worry," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I think Saturday's ceremony will be very educational for everyone involved." On the morning of the graduation, I stood in my sprawling hotel suite, the city quiet and hazy below. My reflection in the window was framed by the skyline, but I wasn't looking at myself. I was reviewing my credentials, not out of vanity, but as a final grounding ritual. Dr. Elena Chen, Ph.D., Linguistics, Harvard University. M.Phil, Sociolinguistics, University of Oxford. Postdoctorate, Cognitive Philology, the Sorbonne, author of 12 peer-reviewed books on language acquisition and preservation. Fluent in 8 languages. The line item that brought a grim smile to my face was my official title, UNESCO Special Advisor on Multilingual Education. The girl whose accent was once compared to broken glass now advised the United Nations on the value of global voices. My phone buzzed with good luck messages from colleagues in Geneva, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo, but they were just noise. Today, only one person's recognition mattered. The pre-ceremony faculty reception was a loud, stuffy affair in the school library. I could hear Mrs. Henderson before I saw her, her voice cutting through the chatter as she complained to a circle of nodding acolytes about lowered standards and the tragedy of modern education. I paused at the doorway, took a deep breath, and entered. The room did not fall silent, it froze. I was wearing my full Harvard doctoral regalia, the deep crimson robes and velvet chevrons a startling slash of color against the drab beige of the library. Heavy gold tassels and the cords of international academic honors draped my shoulders. Principal Morris rushed over, beaming. "Everyone," he announced, his voice booming with pride. "May I have your attention? Please welcome our distinguished alumna and keynote speaker, Dr. Elena Chen, UNESCO's Special Advisor on Multilingual Education." A smattering of polite applause broke the silence. Across the room, I saw Mrs. Henderson's wine glass tremble in her hand, a single drop of red splashing onto the pristine white tablecloth. The connection was beginning to spark. She approached me like a ghost, her face pale and slack with dawning recognition. "Elena?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Elena Rodriguez Chen?" The use of my father's name, the name I used when I was her student, felt like a violation. I looked at her, my expression unreadable. "Just Chen now, Mrs. Henderson," I said, my voice cool and clear. "I legally changed it when I published my first book, at Cambridge." Each word was a carefully placed stone, building a wall she could never hope to climb. The color drained completely from her face as 15 years of willful ignorance collapsed in an instant. The broken girl she had dismissed was standing before her, draped in the unimpeachable armor of elite academia. "You," she stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. I took out my phone, a tool more powerful than any red pen. I didn't have to argue or explain. The world had already validated me. I brought up my own Wikipedia page and held the screen out for her to see. Her shaking hands struggled to focus on the text. Youngest recipient of the International Linguistic Society's Lifetime Achievement Award. Advisor to the UN on Preserving Endangered Languages. Chair of multiple international symposia. Her eyes scanned the list of accomplishments that spanned continents and disciplines, each one a testament to the voice she had tried to crush. Other faculty members, sensing the dramatic tension, began to drift closer. Principal Morris, gloriously oblivious, clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Isn't it wonderful?" He beamed at the growing crowd. "Elena is one of our most successful graduates in school history." Mrs. Henderson, trapped and exposed, attempted a pathetic retreat to plausible deniability. A weak, trembling smile touched her lips. I always knew she had potential," she stammered, looking around for support that wasn't there. The lie was so audacious I almost laughed. Instead, I let the silence hang for a beat before I sliced through it. "Actually, Mrs. Henderson, you didn't," I said, my voice dangerously calm and audible to everyone around us. "You told me, in this very library, that I had none. You said, and I quote, 'Your accent will make you unemployable in any professional setting.' You suggested I not waste my time or yours by applying to four-year universities." A collective, sharp intake of breath came from the teachers around us. Mrs. Henderson looked like I had physically slapped her. It was time to walk to the auditorium. She trailed behind me, a pathetic shadow of the titan who had once terrorized the school's hallways. As we neared the stage entrance, she rushed to my side, her hand grabbing my arm. "Elena, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "I made mistakes. I was older then. I was trying to help you fit in." The excuse was so flimsy, so insulting, it barely registered. I stopped and turned to face her one last time before the speech. "No, Mrs. Henderson," I said, pulling my arm from her grasp. "You weren't trying to make me fit in. You were trying to make me disappear." I left her standing there, her face a mask of pure horror. "But don't worry," I called back over my shoulder. "After today, you'll never forget me again." The walk to the podium felt like 100 years and no time at all. The auditorium was a galaxy of flashing phones and expectant faces, with the professional glare of media cameras from the local news affiliate adding a layer of intensity. I found Mrs. Henderson immediately, seated in her specially requested front row faculty seat. She looked physically ill, her skin pale and waxy under the harsh stage lights. I adjusted the microphone, letting the silence stretch for a beat too long, and then I began. "Gewe bi yasheng, gewe lai bin." My voice rang out, clear and unburdened in perfect Mandarin. "Jintian, wo young wo xin, ling da yu yan, xiang ni men, jiang hua." Today I speak to you in the languages of my heart. The effect was instantaneous. A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. In the front row, Mrs. Henderson shrank in her seat, her carefully constructed world beginning to shatter. I flowed from one language to the next, a living demonstration of the world she feared. "Porque cada idioma lleva una historia," I continued in seamless Spanish. "Una cultura, una forma de ver el mundo." I paused, switching to the flawless English she had once demanded of me. Because every language carries a story, a culture, a way of seeing the world. On the faces of the graduates, I saw sparks of recognition and pride. A girl in the third row whispered to her mother, who was dabbing her eyes. A boy wearing a sash with the Mexican flag sat up straighter. They were being seen, their heritage honored in a space that had so often demanded conformity. All the while, my eyes kept returning to Mrs. Henderson. Her face was a canvas of cycling emotions, from the shock of my opening to the dawning horror of my Spanish, to the deep, burning shame that now colored her cheeks as I spoke the very English she had declared my enemy. Then I lowered my voice, drawing the entire audience into a more intimate space. 15 years ago, I said, the auditorium falling so silent I could hear the hum of the lights. On this very campus, a teacher told me that my accent was like broken glass. She told me it was ugly, and that it would prevent me from ever achieving anything of worth. I didn't look at her, but I could feel the energy in the room shift, could sense the director in the media truck instructing his camera operator to pan across the faculty section. She said that communication is everything in America, and that because of the way I spoke, I would never, ever succeed. On the large screens flanking the stage, I saw her face appear for a split second, hand half covering her mouth, eyes wide with panic, before the shot cut back to me. It was all the confirmation I needed. That teacher believed language was a wall, I continued, my voice growing stronger. But I have learned that it is a bridge. She believed an accent was a weakness. I have learned it is a sign of courage. To prove it, I delivered the same inspirational passage, a message of hope and resilience, in 8 different languages, one after the other. I spoke it in the French of my postdoctoral studies, the German of my first international conference, the Italian I learned for love, the Japanese for a research project, the Arabic of my UNESCO colleagues, and the Portuguese of my friends in Brazil. After each translation, a fresh wave of applause erupted from a new section of the audience, a spontaneous, rolling celebration of global diversity that Mrs. Henderson was forced to witness. She sat frozen, a statue of regret, while the world I represented cheered louder and louder. Finally, I brought my gaze back to the faculty section, letting it rest directly on her. The cameras followed my line of sight. "That teacher sits among us today," I said, my voice softening but losing none of its edge. "And I want her to know something." On the big screen, Mrs. Henderson's face was now streaked with tears, a spectacle of public ruin. "I want to thank you," I said, the words dripping with victorious irony. "Thank you for teaching me that my voice, my accent, my languages, they were never my limitations. They were my superpowers, just waiting to be unleashed." The auditorium exploded. The entire graduating class, their families, and most of the faculty rose to their feet in a deafening standing ovation that went on, and she just sat there, small and defeated, as the sound of my triumph washed over her. The ceremony's climax was my own personal design. As a distinguished alumna, I was invited to present diplomas alongside Principal Morris and the head of the English department, Mrs. Henderson. She could not refuse. She stood beside me, her hands trembling, her eyes red-rimmed and empty, forced to smile for photos. As each student crossed the stage, I leaned in and offered a quiet word of congratulations in their family's heritage language, whenever I could recognize it from their name or the sash they wore. When Ji-hoon Kim, the Korean boy I'd seen her belittle, walked toward us, I shook his hand warmly. "Joleobel jinsimyoro kugadoribnida," I said in perfect Korean. "Congratulations on your graduation." His face lit up with a brilliant, incredulous smile. Mrs. Henderson flinched as if she'd been struck, forced to stand by and watch as I effortlessly demonstrated everything she had told him and me was impossible. Afterward, the media descended. I gave calm, articulate interviews, speaking passionately about the dangers of linguistic discrimination in American schools. "Every student deserves to have their voice celebrated," I told the Channel 4 reporter, not corrected into silence. In the background, I saw Mrs. Henderson hurrying past the cameras, head down, refusing to comment as reporters called out her name. The victory was complete, public, and undeniable. As I was finally escorted to my waiting car, my phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew exactly who it was from. The preview on my screen read, "Elena, please call me. I need to explain. I need to apologize. Margaret Henderson." Back in the quiet sanctuary of my hotel suite, I finally unzipped the heavy doctoral robes and let them fall onto a plush armchair. I was still wearing them when I read her text message again. "Elena, please call me. I need to explain. I need to apologize. Margaret Henderson." Margaret, the woman who had never bothered to learn my name correctly, now used her own as a desperate plea for intimacy. I stared at her message, my finger hovering over the delete button. 15 years of her ghost haunting the corners of my ambition, and she thought it could all be fixed with a text message and a phone call. Before I could decide, my phone began to ring. Her name flashed on the screen. I answered and said nothing. Her voice came through the speaker, a broken, ragged thing, shredded by tears. Elena, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I was wrong. I was so terribly, terribly wrong about you." The sobs were wet and convulsive, the soundtrack to a complete unraveling. I remained silent, listening to the sounds of a life's certainty collapsing in on itself. Please, she begged, her voice thick with desperation. Can we meet? Just for a few minutes. I can't leave it like this. Please, can I just make this right somehow? I let the silence stretch, a form of pressure she had never experienced from me before. Finally, I spoke, my voice devoid of any emotion. The coffee shop on Milburn Avenue, 30 minutes. I chose it deliberately. It was the small, dingy cafe where I used to hide after school, nursing a single cup of tea for hours to avoid going home, to the shame she had heaped on me that day. She arrived looking like she had aged a decade since the morning ceremony, her face puffy and her clothes rumpled. She clutched a wad of tissues in one hand. "Thank you for coming," she whispered as she slid into the booth. Her opening words were exactly what I expected, a desperate monologue of self-preservation disguised as an apology. She talked about her upbringing, how she was raised to believe in one right way, how she genuinely thought she was helping immigrant students fit in by forcing them to shed their identities. "I see now," she said, fresh tears welling in her eyes, "that I was just erasing the most beautiful parts of who you were." She offered everything: a public apology, letters of recommendation to anyone I wanted. She would even resign, she said, if that's what it would take. My coffee grew cold as I listened without a single flicker of expression. When her stream of excuses finally petered out, I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I looked at her directly, my gaze steady. "Mrs. Henderson, do you remember what you told me when I came to you for extra help a week before the college entrance exams?" She looked utterly baffled. The public humiliation at graduation was a monumental event she could not ignore, but this was just one small, forgotten cruelty among 1,000 others. She shook her head, her eyes blank with confusion. "You told me," I said, my voice as flat and final as a verdict, "that I shouldn't waste your time or mine, that some students, and I quote, simply aren't college material. You told me to focus on more realistic vocational pursuits." Her face crumpled as a new wave of shame washed over her. "Elena, please." "No." I said the word calmly as I stood to leave, my voice cutting through her plea. It wasn't a word of anger, but of finality, of closure, but only for me. "No, I will not absolve you of this. No, I will not pretend this conversation erases the 15 years of doubt you deliberately planted in my mind and the minds of countless other students. And no," I said, delivering the final blow, "I will not rob you or your future students of the powerful lesson you are all about to learn about consequences." I turned and walked toward the door, leaving her sitting alone in the dingy booth where her victim used to hide. She called my name, but I didn't look back. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. By the time I returned to my hotel, news articles and clips of my speech had gone viral, sparking a national conversation with the headline, "The Broken Glass Speech, Alumna Scholar Calls Out Linguistic Discrimination." Mrs. Henderson's old Facebook posts had been unearthed and were being shared thousands of times, a digital monument to her own bigotry. My phone rang. It was Principal Morris. His voice was strained. "Dr. Chen, Elena, I wanted to let you know. Margaret submitted her resignation this afternoon, effective immediately." I listened, took a breath, and gave the only response that felt true. That was her choice to make. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my house in Malibu, a glass of wine in hand, watching the Pacific swallow the sun in impossible streaks of orange and violet. The ocean breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the garden below, a gentle perfume of peace. On the table beside me sat an advance copy of my latest book, The Polyglot Mind. The dedication page was simple: for every student whose voice was deemed insufficient. My phone buzzed constantly with interview requests and speaking invitations, the aftershocks of the graduation speech still rippling through the world. But tonight, the world could wait. This moment of quiet victory belonged only to me. The true rewards, however, arrived not in press clippings, but in my inbox. I had a folder labeled Voices Unleashed, and I read from it often. An email from a high school girl in Ohio. I always felt ashamed of my grandmother's Portuguese accent until I saw your speech. Now I think it's beautiful. A message from a college student in Texas. I used to only speak Spanish with my family. Now, thanks to you, I'm proud to be bilingual everywhere. Each message was a small rebellion, a quiet victory against the thousands of Mrs. Hendersons of the world. Each one was a shard of broken glass being fashioned into a stained glass window. The tremors from my speech also shook the foundations of academia. I formally accepted the endowed chair position at Columbia University, the Margaret Rivera Chair in Linguistic Justice, named for my mother, reclaiming the name Margaret for my own family and heritage. My new corner office overlooked the sprawling campus where I would train the next generation of educators, and I established a non-negotiable requirement for my program. Every prospective teacher must spend a semester abroad and become, at minimum, conversational in a language spoken by their future students. Mrs. Henderson's resignation had created a vacuum, and I was filling it with everything she had tried to stamp out. Last month, I had a visitor. Ji-hoon Kim, the boy from Mrs. Henderson's class, stopped by my new office. He was a freshman now at NYU studying international relations, his posture straight, his voice confident. He looked nothing like the slumped, defeated boy I had seen through the classroom window. "Dr. Chen," he said, a bright, genuine smile on his face. "That day you spoke Korean at graduation." It was the first time I ever felt proud of my voice in an American classroom. I just wanted to thank you. Watching him walk away across the sunny campus, filled with a confidence I never had at his age, felt more validating than any degree or award. The cycle closed in the most unexpected way. An email arrived from the new English department head at Lincoln High. "Dr. Chen," it read, "the school board has approved a complete overhaul of our curriculum to better reflect our student body. We were wondering if you would consider developing and consulting on our new multilingual literature program." The opportunity to transform the very classroom where I had been broken was laid at my feet. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my response already formed. "Yes," I wrote, "but I have conditions." Sometimes I think of her when I'm on my rooftop garden in Manhattan, tending to the plants I've nurtured from 8 different countries. The French lavender grows beside the Japanese maples. The Italian basil thrives near the Mexican marigolds. I remember her words about weeds in the pristine garden of American English. My garden, in its riotous, cooperative, breathtaking diversity, proves her wrong every single day. Now, when I stand before a new cohort of teachers at my summer linguistics institute, I see the future. Their faces reflect every continent. Their voices carry the cadence of every corner of the globe. A young woman in the front row, taking notes with a fierce, focused determination, reminds me of someone I used to be. Your students' languages are not obstacles to overcome, I tell them, my voice clear and strong. They are bridges to build. 15 years ago, I believed Mrs. Henderson's verdict that my accent made me broken. Tonight, my voice reaches millions, and I am fluent in the languages of power, prestige, and, finally, peace. The girl with the broken glass accent became the woman whose voice became crystal clear, not in spite of her differences, but because of them. Just as I turned to go inside, my phone lit up one last time. It was a notification from LinkedIn. "Margaret Henderson wants to connect with you." The message preview was visible beneath her name. "I've been following your work. I was wrong about everything. You've become exactly who you were meant to be." For a moment, I stared at it, this final, pathetic white flag from a war she had lost so completely. I felt nothing, no anger, no pity, not even satisfaction. My finger moved across the screen, pressed the decline button, and I turned off the phone. I didn't need her apology or her validation. The ocean breeze carried away the last echoes of the doubt she'd ever planted in my mind, and I was finally, truly free.